Jake Morrison stood at the window of his office on Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly below. The blue and white planet looked peaceful from space, but Jake knew better. He had lived through enough storms, earthquakes, and wars to understand what that beautiful world really was. It was a killer. His desk computer chimed with an incoming message. The seal of Earth's diplomatic corps appeared on the screen, followed by words that made Jake sit up straight. He was being called to represent humanity before something called. The Galactic Harmony Council. Jake read the message 3 times before it sank in. Aliens. Real aliens. Not just the microbes they had found on Mars, or the strange signals from deep space. Intelligent beings from other worlds, and they wanted to meet with humans. The message was short but clear. Earth had applied to join an alliance of 47 alien species. The Council would decide if humans were worthy of membership. Jake and one other person would go to represent all of humanity. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the transport bay. The other representative was waiting for him there, and Jake was curious to meet whoever Earth's leaders had chosen for this impossible job. Dr. Lisa Hayes was loading equipment into the shuttle when Jake arrived. She was younger than he had expected, maybe 35, with the kind of steady hands that came from years of careful work. Her clothes were practical rather than fancy, and she moved like someone who had spent time in dangerous places. "Commander." "Morrison?" she asked, looking up from a case of instruments. "I'm Lisa Hayes. Looks like we're partners for this trip." Jake shook her hand. Her grip was firm, and he noticed small scars on her fingers. Laboratory accidents, maybe, or fieldwork in rough conditions. "What's your background, Doctor?" "Xenobiology and cultural studies," Lisa said, closing the equipment case. "I've spent the last 10 years studying how life develops on different types of worlds." "What about you?" "Military, mostly. Colonial security, some diplomatic protection work." Jake looked at the pile of equipment Lisa had brought. "What are we dealing with out there?" Lisa pulled up a holographic display showing the Galactic Councils. "Member species." Jake stared at the strange creatures floating in the air before him. Some looked like walking plants, others like crystalline sculptures that somehow moved and thought. All of them seemed delicate, almost fragile. "They're all from what we call garden worlds," Lisa explained. "Planets where the weather is always mild, where natural disasters are rare, where the most dangerous animals are about as threatening as rabbits." Jake studied the aliens more carefully. Their eyes were mostly on the sides of their heads, like prey animals. Their bodies seemed built for a world without predators, without real danger. "And they want to judge whether we're good enough to join their club?" "That's the problem," Lisa said, switching off the display. "They've never met anyone like us before. Our application scared them. They've been reading our history, learning about Earth's environment, and they don't understand how anything could survive on our world." The transport ship UES Intrepid was waiting for them at the main docking bay. It was a good ship, built for long journeys and equipped with the best diplomatic facilities Earth could manage. Jake and Lisa would have 3 weeks during the journey to prepare for their meeting with the Council. As they settled into their quarters, Jake asked the question that had been bothering him since reading the initial briefing. "Why us? There are better diplomats, people with more experience in first contact situations." Lisa looked out at the stars as the Intrepid pulled away from Luna Station. "I think they chose us because we understand what Earth really is. We've both worked in hostile environments, dealt with dangerous situations. We know what it means to be human." During their journey, they studied everything the Council had sent about their member species. The Zentari, their hosts, had evolved on a world where the biggest storm in recorded history had wind speeds of 20 miles per hour. The Kalari came from a planet where the concept of winter didn't exist. The Vorthik had achieved spaceflight. without ever developing weapons more dangerous than tools for cutting plants. Jake found it hard to believe. How do you become intelligent without facing challenges? How do you develop technology without needing to solve survival problems? Very slowly and very carefully, Lisa answered. Their evolution took twice as long as ours, maybe 3 times as long. They had the luxury of time because their worlds didn't try to kill them every few thousand years. As the Intrepid approached Centauri Prime, Jake and Lisa got their first look at a garden world. It was beautiful, with soft blue oceans and green continents covered in what looked like carefully tended parks. There were no ice caps, no deserts, no signs of the violent geological processes that had shaped Earth. It's like a painting, Jake said, watching the planet grow larger on their screens. It's what Earth might have been like if we'd been luckier, Lisa replied. But then we wouldn't be us, would we? The final approach to Centauri Prime took 6 hours. During that time, Jake and Lisa received detailed instructions about council protocols, translation procedures, and diplomatic customs. The aliens had been very specific about behavior they considered threatening or inappropriate. We can't make sudden movements, Jake read from the list. We can't show our teeth when we smile. We can't discuss hunting, fighting, or competitive sports. We can't mention any Earth animals larger than a house cat. Lisa laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. They're afraid of us, Jake. They're terrified of what we represent. Maybe they should be, Jake said quietly. He was thinking about the wars he had fought, the colonies he had helped defend, the times when being human had meant being willing to do violence to protect innocent people. But that was the point, wasn't it? Humans did violence to protect others, not just to destroy. They had learned to fight because their world had taught them that sometimes fighting was the only way to survive, the only way to keep the people you cared about safe. As the Intrepid entered orbit around Centauri Prime, Jake and Lisa prepared for the most important meeting in human history. They would represent their species before beings who had never known war, never faced extinction, never had to choose between violence and death. They were about to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that knowledge. The council chambers were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The building seemed to be grown rather than built, with walls that curved like living things and windows that filtered sunlight into soft, gentle colors. Everything about the place spoke of peace, of beings who had never needed to think about defense or protection. Lisa walked beside him through the entrance hall, her diplomatic case in one hand and her datapad in the other. She moved carefully, trying not to make any sudden movements that might alarm their hosts. The Centauri guide who led them through the building kept glancing back at them nervously, as if he expected them to do something dangerous without warning. The atmosphere is perfectly suited for your species, the guide said in careful, translated English. We have studied your requirements extensively. Temperature, humidity, and air pressure are all within your comfort range. Jake noticed that the guide stayed at least 10 feet away from them at all times. The alien skin was pale blue and almost transparent, showing delicate structures underneath that might have been bones or something else entirely. His eyes were large and set on the sides of his head, giving him a wide field of vision, but making it hard to look directly at the humans. We appreciate your preparations, Lisa said in her most diplomatic voice. Earth sends its gratitude for this opportunity to meet with the Council. The guide's skin flickered with patterns of light that Jake guessed meant something like nervousness. Or fear. Yes, of course, the Council is eager to learn about your species. They entered the main chamber, and Jake felt his breath catch. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch up into the clouds. 47 different seating areas were arranged in a perfect circle, each one designed for a different type of alien body. The technology required to maintain Perfect environmental conditions for so many different species was staggering, but it was the aliens themselves that made Jake's heart race. They were all so different from each other, yet somehow they were all the same in one crucial way. They looked soft, vulnerable, untested by the kind of world that had forged humanity. The Zentari delegates sat in chairs that looked like they were made of crystal and light. The Kalari floated in tanks of some kind of liquid, their color-changing skin shifting through patterns that Jake guessed were their form of communication. The Vorthik were tall and thin, with multiple arms that moved in careful, precise gestures. Not all of them stopped what they were doing when Jake and Lisa entered the chamber. The silence stretched for long seconds. Jake could feel dozens of alien eyes studying him, analyzing him, trying to understand what they were seeing. He kept his face neutral and his posture relaxed, but he was very aware of how his body language might be interpreted by beings who had evolved as prey animals. The human delegation announced their Zentari guide, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Jake Morrison and Dr. Lisa Hayes, representing the species of Earth. A ripple of movement went through the assembled aliens. Some leaned back in their seats, others activated what looked like protective barriers around their seating areas. The Vorthik delegates' multiple arms twitched in what might have been a defensive posture. Jake and Lisa walked to their assigned seats with the measured pace they had practiced during their journey. Every step was careful, every movement designed to appear non-threatening. But Jake could see that their very presence was having an effect on the council members. The seats provided for the humans were simple but well-designed, clearly built from studies of human anatomy and comfort requirements. As they sat down, Jake noticed that their section was slightly isolated from the others, with a clear space around it that seemed too large to be accidental. Counselor Vixai of the Zentari rose from his crystal chair, his transparent skin showing the rapid pulse of whatever served as his circulatory system. The Galactic Harmony Council recognizes the human delegation. We welcome you to Zentari Prime and to these chambers, which have hosted peaceful discourse for over 3 centuries. Lisa stood to respond, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. The people of Earth thank the Council for this opportunity. We come in peace, seeking friendship and cooperation with all the species represented here. Her words were simple and carefully chosen, but Jake could see that even Lisa's act of standing had caused some of the aliens to react with alarm. A few of the Kalari had changed to colors that their briefing materials had identified as warning signals. Several of the smaller species had moved to the back of their seating areas, as far from the humans as possible. Please be seated, Vexai said quickly. We understand that your species has different customs regarding formal interactions. Lisa sat down, and Jake saw some of the tension leave the room. But the fear was still there, just under the surface. These beings had lived their entire evolutionary history without meeting true predators, and something deep in their genetic memory was screening warnings about the humans. Counselor Tethmer of the Aquatic Collective spoke next, his voice bubbling up from his liquid-filled tank. Your application for membership includes extensive documentation about your home world and your species development. The Council has reviewed these materials with great interest. Jake caught the careful phrasing. Interest, not enthusiasm. Not welcome. These aliens had read about Earth's history and been horrified by what they found. We have questions, continued another voice. This came from the Signari delegate, one of the few species that had achieved some degree of mechanical enhancement. Even they, with their metal and crystal augmentations, seemed nervous about the human presence. We are prepared to answer any questions the Council may have, Lisa replied. Your world, said Vixai, consulting what looked like a display made of living light, experiences what you call ice ages every 100,000 years or so. These events destroy most life on your planet's surface. How did your species survive such catastrophes? Lisa glanced at Jake before answering. They had expected this question, but it was still difficult to explain in terms these peaceful beings could understand. Humans learned to adapt, she said simply. We developed tools, learned to use fire, created social structures that allowed us to work together. Each challenge made us stronger and more capable. A wave of what looked like distress passed through the assembled aliens. The concept of becoming stronger through facing deadly challenges was apparently foreign to them. Their species had developed intelligence as a luxury, not as a survival necessity. Your application mentions numerous conflicts between different groups of humans, said the Vorthic delegate, his multiple arms moving in agitated patterns. Wars, you call them. Mass destruction events that your species inflicted upon itself. How do we know you will not bring such violence to our peaceful alliance? This was the question Jake had been dreading. How do you explain to beings who had never known violence that sometimes violence was necessary? How do you describe the difference between destruction and protection to species that had never needed to make that distinction? Humans fight to protect what we value, Jake said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. His voice seemed to carry in the space, and several aliens flinched at the sound. We learned long ago that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be willing to defend it. The chamber fell silent again. Jake's words hung in the air like a challenge, though he had tried to make them sound like an explanation. Counselor Vexy's skin flickered with patterns of light that Jake couldn't interpret. The council will need time to consider all aspects of your application. There are many factors to evaluate. We understand, Lisa said. We are grateful for your consideration and happy to provide any additional information you require. As the session ended and the aliens began to file out of the chamber, Jake noticed that none of them came close to the human section. They gave the two Earth representatives a wide berth. Like prey animals avoiding predators, Jake and Lisa sat in their chairs for a few minutes after the chamber emptied, listening to the soft sounds of the building's environmental systems. That went well, Lisa said with bitter humor. They're scared of us, Jake replied. More scared than I expected. Can you blame them? Lisa asked. We're everything they've never had to deal with. We're living proof that the universe isn't as safe and gentle as they've always believed. Jake looked around the beautiful, peaceful chamber. Maybe it's time someone told them the truth about what's out there in the dark. The second day of hearings began with Dr. Lisa Hayes standing before the assembled council, a holographic display floating beside her showing images of Earth. She had spent the night preparing her presentation, choosing each word carefully to avoid causing panic among the alien delegates. Earth is what we call a dynamic world, Lisa began, her voice steady and professional. Our planet has experienced significant changes throughout its history, and these changes have shaped all life that exists there. The first image showed Earth from space, beautiful and blue with swirling white clouds. Several of the alien delegates relaxed slightly, seeing something that looked peaceful and familiar. Our world orbits a star that varies in its energy output, Lisa continued. This variation, combined with changes in our planet's orbit and rotation, creates what we call climate cycles. The next image showed ice sheets covering most of Earth's northern continents. The reaction from the council was immediate. Gasps and other sounds of distress came from multiple seating areas as the aliens stared at a world locked in frozen death. These ice ages occur roughly every 100,000 years, Lisa explained. During these periods, much of our planet becomes uninhabitable. Temperatures drop far below freezing, and many species become extinct. Counselor Vexhi's skin had gone completely pale, the light patterns beneath his transparent flesh flickering rapidly. Dr. Hayes, are you saying that your planet regularly attempts to kill all life on its surface? Not attempts, Lisa corrected gently. Succeeds. We estimate that Earth has experienced at least 5 major extinction events, each one destroying between 60 and 95% of all existing species. The chamber erupted in sounds of alarm. The Kalari delegates had shifted to colors that their briefing materials translated as extreme distress. Several of the smaller species had activated protective barriers around their seating areas. Lisa waited for the noise to die down before continuing. The most recent major extinction occurred 65 million years ago, when an asteroid 10 kilometers wide struck our planet. She showed them images of the impact crater, still visible after all those millions of years. The blast had been more powerful than all of Earth's nuclear weapons combined, throwing debris into the atmosphere and blocking out the sun for years. This event eliminated the dominant life forms of that time, creatures we call dinosaurs. Some of them were larger than your largest space vessels, with teeth the size of human hands and claws that could cut through stone. The Vorthik delegates' multiple arms were now moving in what looked like panic signals. And these creatures lived on the same world where your species developed? Not exactly, Lisa said. The dinosaurs were extinct long before humans appeared. But their descendants still exist. We call them birds, reptiles, and some of the creatures that live in our oceans. She showed them images of Earth's current predators. Lions hunting on the African plains. Great white sharks cutting through the water. Bears catching salmon in rivers. To Lisa, these were simply examples of Earth's biodiversity. To the Council, they were monsters from their worst nightmares. I don't understand, said Tethmer from his tank. How did any life survive such a hostile environment? How did intelligence ever develop? Lisa smiled, forgetting for a moment that showing teeth might be interpreted as a threat gesture. Several aliens recoiled before she caught herself and composed her expression. Intelligence developed because it had to, she explained. The species that survived were the ones that could adapt, that could learn and change and work together. Each extinction event cleared the way for new forms of life, more complex and more capable than what came before. She showed them the progression of human evolution, from early primates to modern humans. But what she saw as a remarkable success story, the Council saw as a horror tale of survival against impossible odds. Early humans lived in small groups, Lisa continued. They developed tools to hunt animals much larger and stronger than themselves. They learned to use fire to cook food and stay warm during ice ages. They created languages to share knowledge and coordinate their activities. You're describing a species shaped entirely by violence, said the Signari delegate, his mechanical voice carrying tones of disbelief. Everything you've told us suggests that humans became intelligent only because they needed to kill or be killed. Lisa paused, considering how to respond. The alien was right, in a way, but he was missing the other side of the story. Humans did learn to be effective hunters, she admitted, but they also learned to protect each other. Human society is built around the idea of cooperation, of individuals working together for the good of the group. Parents sacrifice for their children. Individuals risk their lives to save strangers. Communities support members who cannot support themselves. She showed them images of human cities, hospitals, schools. But Jake could see that the Council members were still focused on the earlier images of predators and extinction events. Commander Morrison stood up, drawing immediate attention from every alien in the chamber. His movement was fluid and controlled, but it still caused several delegates to lean back in their seats. May I address the Council? Jake asked. Counselor Vexhai nodded nervously. Of course, Commander. Jake walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He moved with the confidence of someone who had faced danger and survived, and that confidence was apparently terrifying to beings who had never needed to develop such traits. Dr. Hayes has told you about Earth's history, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. But she's only given you half the story. Yes, humans learned to fight. We learned to hunt and to defend ourselves. But we also learned why fighting matters. He gestured toward the assembled aliens, his movement slow and non-threatening. Every species represented here has something worth protecting. Your homes, your families, your way of life. The difference between humans and your species isn't that we're more violent. The difference is that we've had to learn how to protect what we love. But at what cost? Asked the Vorthic delegate. Your history is filled with wars, with destruction, with death. How many of your own species have you killed in these conflicts? Jake's expression became somber. Too many. Humans aren't perfect. We've made mistakes, fought wars that didn't need to be fought, caused suffering that could have been avoided. But we've also learned from those mistakes. He showed them images from Earth's recent history. Hospitals treating the wounded. Rescue teams pulling people from earthquake rubble. Soldiers protecting civilians from violence. Modern humans spend more time and resources protecting life than taking it, Jake said. We have eliminated many diseases, reduced poverty, created laws to protect the weak. We've turned our capacity for violence into a tool for protection. The chamber was quiet as the aliens absorbed this information. Jake could see them struggling with the concept of violence as a force for good, of predators who chose to protect rather than simply consume. Your species fascinates and terrifies us, Counselor Vex High said finally. You represent something we have never encountered before. Beings who have faced the worst the universe can offer, and somehow become ... noble. We're not noble, Jake replied. We're just human. We do what we have to do to protect the people we care about. Lisa rejoined Jake at the center of the chamber. The council asked us to explain what humans are, she said. We are a species that learned to be strong, because we had to be. We learned to fight, because fighting was sometimes the only way to survive. But we also learned to love, to sacrifice, to work together. She paused, looking around at the assembled aliens. We didn't come here to frighten you, or to threaten you. We came because we believe that the galaxy is better when different species work together, sharing their strengths and helping each other face whatever challenges might come. The session ended with the council in obvious distress. As the aliens filed out of the chamber, Jake noticed that some of them were looking at the humans with something that might have been respect mixed with their fear. But others were clearly convinced that humanity had no place in their peaceful alliance. The vote, when it came, would be close. The third day of hearings brought unexpected tension to the council chambers. Counselor Tethmer of the Aquatic Collective had requested the floor, and his agitation was visible even through the liquid medium of his containment tank. The council must consider the implications of what we have heard, Tethmar began, his voice bubbling up from his tank with obvious distress. The human delegation has described a species that achieved intelligence through violence, that developed technology, through conflict, that considers warfare a normal part of existence. Jake and Lisa sat in their designated area, listening to the debate unfold around them. They had expected opposition, but the level of fear in Tethmer's voice was surprising. The Aquatic Collective has thrived for 10,000 years without experiencing a single violent death. Tethmer continued. Our cities rest in peace beneath calm seas. Our young mature without fear, without the need to learn violence. How can we welcome into our alliance beings who view death and destruction as natural parts of life? Murmurs of agreement came from several other delegations. The Kalari had shifted to colors that indicated support for Tethmer's position. The smaller species, those that had evolved from what Earth would consider prey animals, were clearly uncomfortable with the idea of sharing space with humans. Counselor Vex High raised a translucent hand for silence. The Aquatic Collective raises. Valid concerns. However, we must also consider the humans' stated intentions and their recent actions. Their application materials show a history of peaceful contact with other species they have encountered. Peaceful contact with microbes and simple organisms, Tefmer countered. We are the first intelligent species they have met. How do we know they will not attempt to conquer us as they have conquered their own world? Lisa requested permission to speak, and Vexhai nodded his consent. She stood slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. Counselor Tefner raises an important point, Lisa said. Humans have indeed learned to be effective at violence when violence is necessary. But we have also learned to choose when. Violence is not necessary. She activated a holographic display showing images from Earth's recent history. Space stations where humans from different nations work together. International rescue efforts during natural disasters. Treaties and alliances that had ended centuries-old conflicts. Modern humans have spent the last century learning to cooperate on a global scale, Lisa explained. We have not eliminated conflict entirely, but we have learned to resolve most. Disputes without warfare. We came to this council not as conquerors, but as potential partners. Tethmer's response was swift and dismissive. Pretty words, Dr. Hayes, but your species' history speaks louder than your intentions. You describe cooperation, but your own presentation yesterday showed us creatures that became intelligent specifically to hunt and kill more efficiently. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Jake felt something shift inside him. Familiar sensation from his military days when diplomacy failed and harder truths needed to be spoken. Counselor Tethmer, Jake said, rising from his seat. The simple act of a human male standing to his full height caused several aliens to activate protective shields around their seating areas. May I ask you a question? Tethmer's colors shifted to patterns that the translation system interpreted as cautious agreement. You may ask. In your 10,000 years of peaceful existence, has your species ever encountered a threat that required physical force to resolve? The question seemed to confuse the aquatic collective's representative. We have no concept of such threats, Commander. Our world provides all we need. Conflict is resolved through discussion and mutual understanding. Jake nodded slowly, then began walking toward the center of the chamber. His movement was casual, relaxed, but every alien in the room tracked his progress with obvious anxiety. That's what I thought, Jake said. Your species has been incredibly fortunate. You've never met pirates who wanted to steal your resources. You've never encountered slavers who viewed your people as property. You've never faced an enemy that wanted to destroy you simply because you existed. He stopped in the center of the chamber, turning slowly to look at each delegation in turn. But the galaxy is a big place, Counselor, and not everyone in it is as peaceful as the species represented in this chamber. Vexhai's skin flickered with nervous patterns. Commander, Morrison, are you suggesting there are hostile species we should be concerned about? Jake's smile was grim. I'm not suggesting it, Counselor. I'm stating it as fact. Your own intelligence services have been tracking the Devourers for the past year, a species that consumes other intelligent beings for sustenance. They've been probing your outer territories, testing your defenses. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates began talking all at once. Some species had clearly not been informed about the Devourer situation, while others seemed to have been hoping it would resolve itself without requiring action. The Devourers are still distant, Tefmer protested. They may never pose a direct threat to Council space. Jake's expression became deadly serious. Counselor, with respect, you have no idea what you're talking about. I've read your intelligence reports. The Devourers aren't just randomly expanding their territory. They're conducting reconnaissance, mapping your defenses, studying your capabilities. He activated his own holographic display, showing star charts and tactical analyses that made several aliens recoil in horror. They've already probed 17 of your outer systems. They've tested your response times, evaluated your defensive capabilities, and determined that you pose no significant threat to their expansion. Lisa joined Jake at the center of the chamber, her scientific training evident in her analysis of the situation. The Devourers evolved on a world even more hostile than Earth, she said quietly. But unlike humans, they never learned to see other intelligent beings as anything more than food sources. They are what you fear humans might become. This is precisely why we cannot admit humans to our alliance, Tethmer declared, his colors shifting to aggressive patterns. You speak of violence and conquest as if they were natural states of being. You bring talk of war to our peaceful chambers. Jake's patience finally snapped. The sound that came from his throat was barely human, a growl that spoke to millions of years of predator evolution. Every alien in the chamber froze. You think we bring war? Jake's voice was quiet, but it carried throughout the chamber like thunder. We didn't create the Devourers, Counselor. We didn't teach them to hunt intelligent beings. We didn't make them into the threat that's coming for your peaceful worlds. He gestured toward the star charts, still floating in the air. But we can stop them. Humans know how to fight creatures like the Devourers because we've been fighting our own version of them for millions of years. Every predator on Earth taught us something about survival, about protecting what matters. Lisa stepped forward, her voice gentler but equally firm. The Council has a choice. You can reject humanity because we frighten you, because we represent a type of intelligence you've never encountered before. Or you can accept that the galaxy isn't as safe as you've always believed, and ally with the one species that has the experience to help you face what's coming. The chamber fell silent as the implications of the humans' words sank in. The aliens were facing a reality they had never had to consider, that their peaceful existence might require the protection of beings shaped by violence. Counselor Vex High spoke first, his voice trembling slightly. Are you saying that humanity would be willing to fight the Devourers on behalf of the Council? Jake's expression softened slightly. We're saying that humans have spent their entire evolutionary history learning to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's what we do, Counselor. It's who we are. But why? Asked the Vorthic delegate, his multiple arms moving in confused patterns. Why would you risk your lives for species you barely know? Lisa smiled, this time careful, not to show her teeth. Because that's what intelligent beings do for each other. Because the galaxy is better when we work together. Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. The session ended with the Council in chaos, delegates arguing among themselves about threats they had never imagined and protectors they weren't sure they could trust. But Jake noticed that the fear in their eyes had changed. They were still afraid of humans, but now they were more afraid of facing the galaxy's dangers without them. As Jake and Lisa left the chamber, they knew the real vote would happen in the private discussions that followed. The Council would have to decide whether their fear of humanity was greater than their fear of what might be coming for them in the dark. 3 days passed before the Council recalled Jake and Lisa to the chambers. 3 days of waiting while the aliens debated humanity's fate behind closed doors. Jake spent the time reviewing tactical reports about the Devourers, while Lisa studied the cultural files of each Council species, trying to understand what fears and hopes might influence their decision. On the morning of the 4th day, they received word that the Council had reached a decision. As they walked through the corridors of the Zentari complex, Jake noticed that the alien staff members were watching them differently. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Curiosity, maybe, or a kind of cautious respect. The chamber looked different when they entered. The seating arrangements had been changed, with some species grouped together and others sitting apart. Jake recognized the political maneuvering that had taken place during their absence. Alliances had been formed and broken, deals made and abandoned, Counselor Vex High stood as they took their seats, his transparent skin showing the rapid pulse of whatever served as his heart. The Galactic Harmony Council has spent considerable time discussing humanity's application for membership. The debates have been extensive. Lisa noticed that several delegations looked exhausted. The peaceful aliens were not accustomed to the kind of intense political negotiations that had apparently taken place. For species that normally resolve disputes through calm discussion, the past 3 days must have been overwhelming. The Council has had to consider matters that we have never faced before, Vex High continued. Questions about the nature of intelligence, the role of violence in galactic society, and the responsibilities that come with power. Jake's military training told him to watch for signs of which way the vote had gone. The aquatic collectives. Seating area was heavily shielded, suggesting they still saw humans as a threat. But the Kalari had positioned themselves closer to the human section, their colors showing patterns that the briefing materials translated as cautious optimism. We have also had to consider information that has come to light during these hearings. Vex High said, his voice growing more serious. Intelligence reports that some council members were not fully aware of. Threats that we had hoped to resolve through diplomatic means. The chamber grew quiet as Vex High paused, clearly struggling with what he had to say next. The Devourer probe ships have been detected in the Kepler sector. They are no longer a distant threat. Our defensive networks estimate they will reach the outer colonies within 6 months. A wave of distress passed through the assembled aliens. Several of the smaller species activated emergency protocols, while others began transmitting rapid communications to their home worlds. The peaceful Council was finally confronting the reality that their protected existence might be coming to an end. In light of this information, Vex High continued, the Council has been forced to reconsider our traditional approaches to membership and alliance. We have asked ourselves difficult questions about the nature of protection and the price of peace. Tethmer rose from his tank, his colors now showing patterns of reluctant acceptance rather than the aggressive opposition he had displayed earlier. The aquatic collective has always believed that violence breeds only more violence. We maintain this belief. However, we have also come to understand that sometimes violence comes to those who seek only peace. Jake felt a moment of sympathy for the alien leader. Tethmer's entire worldview was being forced to change, and it was clearly painful for him. After extensive debate, Vex High said, the Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's application for membership. The pause seemed to last forever. Jake and Lisa sat perfectly still, knowing that the next few words would determine not just their species' future, but possibly the fate of every peaceful civilization in the galaxy. The motion to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Harmony Council has failed by a margin of 26 to 21. Jake felt his heart sink. They had come so close, but fear had won over necessity. However, Vex High continued, and Jake looked up sharply. The Council has voted to approve a new category of alliance membership specifically created for humanity. By a vote of 39 to 8, the Council offers Earth the position of guardian species. Lisa blinked in surprise. Guardian species? That's not a category that existed when we submitted our application, because it was created during our deliberations, explained the Vorthek delegate, his multiple arms moving in what looked like embarrassment. We realized that our traditional membership structure was inadequate for a species like yours. Vex High activated a holographic display showing the terms of the new alliance. As a guardian species, humanity would be granted full access to Council, technology, trade agreements, and diplomatic resources. In exchange, Earth would assume primary responsibility for the defense of Council space against external threats. Jake studied the terms carefully. It was actually better than full membership in many ways. Humans would have access to everything. They needed to protect the Council species, but they would also have the freedom to act decisively when action was required. The Council recognizes that our peaceful species are not equipped to face threats like the Devourers, Vexai admitted. We have spent too many centuries in safety to develop the skills necessary for our own protection. We need guardians who understand violence, who can face it and defeat it. Tethmer's colors shifted to what the translation system called painful honesty. We are afraid of you, humans. Your capacity for violence, your comfort with conflict, your willingness to fight. But we are more afraid of what happens to our children if there is no one standing between them and the darkness. Lisa stood slowly, her diplomatic training taking over. The terms seem reasonable, but I have a question about implementation. How would command authority work during a crisis? Would human forces be required to seek council approval before taking action against threats? That was one of our most difficult discussions, admitted the Signari delegate. We finally agreed that in matters of immediate defense, human commanders would have full autonomy. We cannot protect ourselves by committee when facing an enemy that sees us as food. Jake stood beside Lisa, his mind already working through the tactical implications. And what about ongoing patrol duties? Intelligence gathering? The Devourers won't announce their attacks. All of those responsibilities would fall under human authority, Vexai replied. The Council would provide resources and support, but strategic decisions would be made by Earth's military leadership. It was an extraordinary offer. The peaceful aliens were essentially admitting that they could not protect themselves and asking humanity to take on that burden. But Jake could see the wisdom in the arrangement. Humans would have the freedom to act as they knew was necessary, while the Council species could maintain their peaceful ways of life. The Council would also like to establish joint research programs, added the Kalari delegate, her colors showing excitement for the first time since the hearings began. Human medical knowledge, developed in response to your world's hostile environment, could benefit all our species. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. And human defensive technologies could be adapted for Council use. Our early warning systems, our tactical analysis programs, our emergency response protocols. There is one more thing, Vexai said quietly. The vote. To create this alliance was not unanimous. Some species remain convinced that any association with humanity is too dangerous. They have chosen to withdraw from Council space rather than accept human protection. Jake wasn't surprised. Fear was a powerful force, and some beings would rather face an uncertain future alone than accept help from predators. How many? Lisa asked. 3 species, representing approximately 40 million individuals, Vexai replied. They are relocating to the Outer Rim territories. We wish them well, but we cannot protect them if they choose to leave. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy was changing, and not everyone was willing to change with it. We need time to consult with our government, Jake said finally. This offer is far beyond what we were authorized to negotiate. Of course, Vexai agreed. But please, understand that time is not our ally. The Devourers will not wait for our convenience. As the session ended, Jake and Lisa found themselves surrounded by alien delegates who had never spoken to them before. The Kalari representative approached with obvious nervousness, her colors showing careful hope. If your people accept this alliance, she said quietly, my species would like to work closely with your medical researchers. We have healing techniques that might benefit humans, and we hope to learn from your experience with hostile environments. Other aliens made similar overtures. The prospect of human protection was allowing them to overcome their fear, at least partially. They were beginning to see opportunities rather than just threats. As Jake and Lisa prepared to leave Centauri Prime, they carried with them more than just an alliance offer. They carried the hopes and fears of 44 different species, all of whom were looking to humanity to protect them from a galaxy that had suddenly become much more dangerous. Think Our people will accept? Lisa asked as their ship pulled away from the station. Jake watched the peaceful blue world shrink behind them. How can we not?